Cardiff City. It's the end of an era. I recently said goodbye to my favourite seat in the Bob Bank at Ninian Park. So with a new stadium built and the fans' hopes on a premiership, what better time to look back at the club's history? And who better to tell us than the club's historian, Richard Shepherd? So where did it all begin for Cardiff City?
Hey Jude.
It was founded out of Riverside Cricket Club. One of the members of Riverside Cricket Club was a man called Bartley Wilson, who worked for a local printer. He was keen on football, and he thought a football club would be an idea to keep his cricketers together socially during the winter months. So he formed the football club after a couple of attempts and called it Riverside Football Club.
When did Riverside Football Club become known as Cardiff City FC?
When the city of Cardiff, or when Cardiff became a city in 1905, he wanted to call his club Cardiff City, but the local South Wales and Monmouthshire Football Association wouldn't allow it. They said that the club didn't play in a high enough standard. Well, they got into the South Wales Amateur League in 1908, and then they were given permission to call themselves Cardiff City with a proviso that if a professional club was formed, then that would take the name of Cardiff City, and Bartley Wilson's club would have to revert to being Riverside. Well, it was Wilson and his colleagues who took the plunge for professionalism, so they kept the name Cardiff City. That was in 1910, and this is the club we know today.
Where does the name Ninian Park come from?
When they turned professional in 1910, they needed an enclosed ground. They looked around various sites. One of the sites they looked at was here on Leckwith Common, as it then was, where this stadium is now. But eventually they decided on a piece of waste ground between the Taff Vale railway line, as it then was, and Sloper Road. They needed 5 guarantors of the annual rent. They had the 5, but one of them pulled out at a vital time. The man who came in to make up the numbers just in time was the middle son of the Marquis of Bute. His name was Lord Ninian Crichton Stewart. They were so grateful to him that they named their new ground Ninian Park.
Where did Cardiff City's notable FA Cup history begin?
They were playing in the preliminary and qualifying rounds of the FA Cup up to 1920 before they got into the Football League. They were elected into the Football League from the Southern League in that year. And during the 20s, they got to the semi-final in their first year in the league. They got to the FA Cup final in 1925. They lost to Sheffield United, but they went back to Wembley 2 years later and beat Arsenal in the 1927 final.
And now the goal that's been talked about probably more than any other. The scorer, Hughie Ferguson. The City supporters go wild with excitement.
The BBC had started broadcasting football and rugby in the January of that year. They got permission to broadcast the FA Cup final. Because it was the early stages of commentary, the commentators didn't really know how to say where the ball was. So what the BBC did was to put a grid in the Radio Times, a plan of the pitch numbered 1 to 8. The commentator would say who'd got the ball, the man alongside him would say which square it was in, and this is believed to be the origin of back to square one. But during the 1920s, no club played more FA Cup matches than Cardiff City. They were always getting to the later stages.
Not only did the Bluebirds have a fantastic FA Cup record, they also held their own in the European Cup.
They got into the European Cup Winners' Cup through winning the Welsh Cup. They weren't the first side to get into the European Cup Winners' Cup from Wales. Bangor City and Swansea Town, as they then were, had done it beforehand. But when Cardiff got in, their first season in it was 64-65, they got to the quarter-final, and along the way they beat the holders Sporting Lisbon. 3 years later they got to the semi-final of the Cup Winners' Cup and went out to Hamburg with the last kick of the second leg. And then 3 years after that they got to the quarter-final and played Real Madrid. They beat them 1-0 at Ninian Park, should have won by more, and lost the second leg 2-0. So they went out, but they can still put it on record that they beat Real Madrid.
Cardiff has always been a colourful club, and never short of colourful characters. Robin Friday was a player in the 1970s, and was recently voted as Cardiff's cult hero.
He was a very, very talented player. Came from Reading in December 1976. He should have gone on to play for England, but he was of doubtful character, and his lifestyle prevented him from making real progress in the game. When he was on form and playing on the pitch, it was great, but caused a few problems off it, and eventually a year later, after joining Cardiff, he retired from football.